Okay, hi everybody. Good morning. Nice to see you all again. Welcome to our all-day movie workshop. I'm Peter, the host today. And yeah, we're all really excited for this movie. We watch this one at least once a year, it seems, but it's a classic, so really looking forward to it. So I will let you know how the day is going to flow for those who are new. We're going to start with the movie with David, and then afterwards we'll have a 10-minute break and then go into our breakout rooms where you can share your experiences, any emotions. And then we'll have a 45-minute break, and then we'll have the closing session, a Q&A session with me. So I'll pass it over to David now.
Thank you, Peter. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We have such a treat today. It's always a blessed time together on Saturdays, but my heart is just bursting open with love at being able to share this movie with you. There's so much joy and happiness in the present moment, and yet the ego, this crazy tiny mad idea, has made up a cosmos of time and space to hide the present moment from us. But we're not going to play hide and seek anymore. We're going to play accept the moment. This is our new game. We've been playing hide and seek with time and space too long. It's time to play accept the present moment. So this is a classic movie today, and what's pulling us into this amazing classic movie so we can all dive into this glorious experience together is the themes that you voted on. And this week was amazing. The top 3 themes received most of the votes, but when I looked at these themes that were in the top 3 position, right away, the movie was given instantaneously because there's not a whole lot of movies that can show these 3 themes so exquisitely. This is like a masterpiece. We're like watching Leonardo da Vinci today. We're watching Picasso. We're listening to Mozart and Beethoven. We are going to be watching a film that is made by a husband and wife team, a partnership of movie makers. Some of you have heard of Luc Besson before. Luc Besson and his wife, Virginie. He's doing it, she's producing it, and these 2 partners have put together a huge collaboration of an amazing awakening movie. And so here are the top themes for today. This movie will help us with these 3 themes. Coming in at number 1 was living in full integrity, being uncompromising in my desire for truth. Living in full integrity. A lot of times when people think about integrity, they think that maybe integrity is a characteristic that human beings could aspire to. We always say if that person has integrity, they have consistency, they have alignment in their life. There aren't a bunch of exceptions. They say what they mean what they say. They follow through in what they promise. That's what we think of when we think of integrity. Jesus has a higher definition of integrity than that. He's saying integrity is of the mind. So Jesus is saying, when you have alignment with the Holy Spirit, when you are in alignment with oneness and truth, everything you think and say and do will be in alignment, and everything you feel will be in alignment, and everything you believe will be in alignment. So some of you know I have a website called Levels of Mind, and there's 5 different levels, starting with desire, belief, thoughts, emotions, perceptions. Integrity means that all of those levels are completely in alignment. And that is a miracle. That's what Jesus calls a miracle. When everything you desire and you believe and you think and you feel and you perceive is in total alignment, you realize that time is simultaneous. That you were completely mistaken about linear time, because you will never find integrity in a perception of linear time. It might as well give it up right now and just say, if I'm going to have integrity, I have to let go of everything. And I mean everything with a capital E. Everything that I've perceived has been mistaken, not slightly mistaken, not proportionally mostly mistaken, 100% mistaken. Because of course, there's no cause and effect in that are separate. That's the whole problem. Heaven is realizing cause, God and Christ, the effect, are together. So everything perceived with the five senses is a mistake because it's linear. Now, the happy dream is seeing that time is simultaneous. So you're deliriously happy because you don't have a future or a past. You've got nothing left to feel guilty for or regretting. And of course, you have no worries or concerns either for the future because it's not there. There is no future. There is no past when time is simultaneous. So, wow, big one. I think that's 70 votes, living in full integrity, being uncompromising in my desire for truth. Yeah, Jesus is like, well, we're going to have to pull out one of the all-time classic non-compromising movies for teaching purposes today. And that movie is Lucy. Hands down, if you want an uncompromising way shower to show you that you have to be uncompromising in all your decisions, Lucy, hands down. I mean, you know, it's pretty rapid. Even in the Matrix, over 3 trilogy movies, slowly we see a Neo going back and forth, round and round. No, Lucy is on a rocket, a skyrocket to the present moment, and she is not looking back. She's not looking left or right. Also, Lucy fits well with the second theme. Let go of trying to activate the past, organize the present, or plan the future. That's from lesson 135. Theme number 2 was derived from workbook lesson 135, if you want to check it out in A Course in Miracles. And what that basically is saying is everything that your teachers taught you in school is false. Everything that you learned from your parents is false. Everything that science has taught us, and I'm talking about science, I'm talking about Newtonian science. Most of us grew up reading Newtonian science books. It's all false. There's not a single thread of Newtonian science that is true because it's based on empirical evidence, and there is nothing out there. It's been a lot of studies of nothing and a lot of conclusions of nothing. So basically, everything we've ever learned about time and space is not partially wrong or not mostly wrong, it's completely wrong. Thankfully, we had scientists like Albert Einstein come along at the turn of the century, and the quantum physicists, they found a whole new set of principles called quantum mechanics, which actually are they're more accurate. They're actually, I think quantum physics is a very legitimate pathway to God. It's actually legit, not Newtonian. Isaac Newton, sorry, no points for good behavior. No credit points for Newtonian science. You know, what about Darwin? The theory of evolution? No, that's linear. Did humans come from apes, primates, from fish, from? No, sorry, that's all Newtonian. Darwinism's strike 3. Of course. What about Genesis in the Bible? God created the earth on 6 days, and in the 7th day, God rested. No, strike 3. You're out of there too. Darwinism is not have anything relative to what I'm going to talk about today, and neither does creationism as taught in the Bible, in Genesis. So all of that, you have to realize, oh my gosh, whether we were getting our information from science or from old-time religion of how the world came about and everything, no, God doesn't create in days, and God doesn't rest on the seventh day, because creation is pure spirit, and creation doesn't have anything whatsoever to do with linear time and space. Spirit is pure love, pure oneness, and that's what we're going for today in the movie. Okay, number 3, coming in number 3 with 50 votes, stay with what's given and do only that. Ding, 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 Lucy jumps out. Lucy is a movie where Lucy will stay with what's given and do only that. She is not messing around with her self-realization journey. She is not messing around with self-actualization. She is not figuring it's going to take centuries or even decades, or for that matter, weeks. This movie is going to move rapidly through the stages of awakening, and that's going to take us into a state of mind that is pure love and pure light. And this movie really is showing the way. So maybe I should go back a little bit to talk about the impossibility of linear time, because everything that we have perceived as human beings is rooted in the belief that cause and effect are separate, that Christ, the effect of God, could leave heaven, and suddenly take on a new identity in time and space. And instead of being pure spirit, pure I am presence, pure eternal love, the belief in the ego is the belief that Christ can actually leave the mind of God and then make up a new identity, a time-space identity, identity with a body, identity with linear perception. And this strange thing called linear perception comes about in consciousness. Perception doesn't take place inside the body. The brain is not the problem. The neuron transmitters firing in the brain, the neurons are not the problem. Nothing in the body is the problem, because the body is a projection of consciousness. And yet ideas leave out their source. So consciousness is just the domain of the ego, Jesus calls it. Consciousness is the domain of the ego, and it's a state of mind in which the separation from God seems to have happened. So everything we perceive through our 5 senses is perceived as if the separation from God happened. You see, that's what makes this world of fragmentation, a world of competition, a world of war, a battle for the survival of the fittest. Even Darwin's theories of evolution kind of involved the battle of the survival of the fittest. And so those creatures that could evolve would be the ones that would seem to survive. At this point, I don't think Darwin did a lot of writing about aliens or life on other planets, but that's okay, because as our beloved friend Ken Wapnick one time said, there is no life on other planets, and the Course says there's no life on this planet. So let's remember, as we watch this movie, that what we have believed is biological life is not life at all. It's fiction, it's make-believe, it's made up. It has no reality whatsoever. And the beautiful thing is, Jesus teaches us in the Course that God is real, and everything God creates in spirit is real. Nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Linear time, time and space, black holes, galaxies, planets, stars, cosmos, nada, nada, nada. You see, these are the divine metaphysics that take us into the remembrance of our beloved Creator. So in this movie, we have Lucy is going to be our example. Lucy will provide us a story of spiritual awakening. Just like there have been stories of awakening, Joseph Campbell wrote a lot about mythology, and in every single culture on earth, we have mythological stories of spiritual awakening. We have stories around Buddha, Siddhartha, and Buddha. We have stories around Jesus of Nazareth and the journey. We have stories of gurus, saints, mystics, avatars, all kinds of stories, and yet we're told that the story is not the actuality. The story is just the little pointer. It's like the old Zen story of the master pointing to the moon, and all the students are talking about the master's finger. and it's like, wait a minute, it's just pointing, just pointing to the light, to the reflected light of the moon. In other words, we have never a need to personify this. We don't have to worship idols. Even the greatest mystics and saints were just symbols pointing us to an actual experience of the present moment. So, if you are going to make an altar in your mind, make an altar to the present moment and to the abstract light and love of God. And in the end, even the Bible says, hold no graven images before the Lord thy God. It's just saying, forget this world, forget this course, and come with wholly empty hands unto your God. So this is just another parable of awakening. Now this movie, Lucy, came out in 2014. In the parable of David, I have never seen a year in time and space where so many awakening movies all came out in the same year. I remember I could not believe the movies that were released in 2014. I actually went to a cinema and I walked down the aisle of the cinema, and almost every movie showing, the Lego movie, I mean, it just went on, and Lucy, every movie in the theater as I walked down was in my Movie Watcher's Guide to Enlightenment. And I thought, what, am I in some kind of a time warp? What is this, 2014? And suddenly Jesus is cranking it up, and the whole theater is filled with spiritual awakening movies, not just good ones either. I mean, the best. It's filled with classics. I thought, Jesus, you are pulling out all the stops. I don't have to do a movie gathering. I can just take somebody out to the cinema. We can get some popcorn and just jump in to all the theaters all afternoon. I don't know if that's legal, but just a thought. So we could have a lot of fun, going around, because they're all expressing the present moment. They're all expressing the joy of the present moment. So that's why we're not into Newtonian science. People say, was there a Big Bang? When did the Big Bang occur? And when will the Big Bang be over? Listen, I'm not interested in those questions. Those are all Newtonian questions. Those are all curiosities of a creature of time and space. And you and I, we're the Christ. We're the same one. We have a spiritual reality. Why should we be interested in the past or the future when the present moment holds everything? It holds our inheritance. It holds our reality. It holds our joy. It holds our glory, our happiness. So you start to realize that, like Lucy in the movie today, now is the time to realize that there's an urgency to accept the atonement. Now, what I like about this movie is early on in the movie, again, we have another great actor in this movie, along with Scarlett Johansson, of course, who plays Lucy, but Morgan Freeman. My gosh, God is in this movie. You're bringing in Morgan Freeman instead of playing God. In here, he's playing like a Darwinian, Newtonian professor who's clueless. Well, that's a pretty good range, you know, God, clueless Darwinian scientist, you know. And it's good because this movie will help us face all of our questions about spiritual awakening. I think in the end, I would say the thing I love about A Course in Miracles and the thing I love about the actual experience of a miracle is it dissolves the questions. It dissolves all the questions. You are left with no questions. You are left in bliss. You are left in harmony. You are left in joy. Well, that's good because that's how we were created. we finally remember, oh my gosh, that's what this is all about. It's all about living in joy and happiness and harmony consistently. So I would say too that this movie is a teaching in perception, just like it's a teaching in consciousness. If someone asks me, what is the difference between perception and consciousness, I would say they are identical. What you believe in your consciousness is exactly the world that you perceive. So in workbook lesson 152 in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says, the power of decision is my own. And in that lesson, he's basically telling us that everything that is perceived, everything without exception, is a result of a decision. And that decision is the ego. If you are perceiving at all, you are perceiving through the ego. I'm talking about linear time. When you come back to perceive with the Holy Spirit, you see the world is simultaneous, and then you are perceiving with the Holy Spirit. But for the human being, that is a construct that's just part of a distorted perception. And most of us have had intuitive feelings about that, like Bill Thedford and Helen Schuckman in Columbia Presbyterian University in New York City. Back in 1965, basically Bill said there has to be another way of living. And Helen said, you're right, Bill, and I will help you find it. So that joining between these two people was saying, let's find a way out of distorted perception. They didn't really realize what they were asking for, but they did realize that they had a very difficult life with their interpersonal relationships and their nitpicking and fighting in academia. It was a very kind of a dark atmosphere, work atmosphere, very heavy. And they prayed for help and they prayed for a better way. Now, I've talked about it many times. People can say, can you make this even more simple? Because I really want this to be simple. And I said, well, all you have to do is two things. One, admit that you have a perceptual problem. And number two, ask for help to be freed from that perceptual problem. It's like that's the 1-2 punch that takes you out of time and space. Now, what do I really mean by admit that you have a perceptual problem? Admit that you've been perceiving the world through a crazy subject-object split, where you see yourself as an observer and the external world is outside of you, outside of your body. That's a perceptual problem. Or maybe you see yourself as a person with a name, and you call yourself by that name, and other people, like your parents, your children, your neighbors, they call you by that name. Amanda's looking like, don't call me Amanda anymore. I am not Amanda. Mike is like, I know, and I'm not Mike either. So you have to realize that the subject-object split is the belief that there's a subject who perceives, and then there's an objective world that's apart from that subject called the world. And many people have said, I want to escape this world, and they hope to build a spaceship and fly to another planet, but that's part of the world too. Like that movie we watched months ago called Don't Look Up, where the president of the United States tries to flee a comet crashing into the world to another planet, and then as soon as she comes out and all of them come out of the spaceship naked, she is eaten, eaten by a creature on another planet. So there is no escape in time and space. The escape is realizing that you had a perceptual problem and that you thought you were the subject and that there were these other people and other creatures. You thought the birds are not me. They're pretty, the flowers are pretty, the sun shines beautiful, I like the leaves, I like the grass, but the subject that believes all those things are external to who you are is not a real subject, and they aren't real objects. Now in this movie, it will have some very Newtonian ideas. One of them is that humans use like 10% of their brain's capability. Of course, we know now that the brain is a projection, so it doesn't have any capabilities. It's a projection. It doesn't even have an existence. But the movie will use the metaphor of 10%, use 10% of your brain more than the other animals, except for dolphins. Dolphins are higher on the evolution. I've heard some stories recently where dolphins are now getting aggressive in this world. Even the dolphins are part of fragmented perception. They're getting a bad rap now. I used to watch Flipper, a show when I was growing up, Flipper, but this is not Flipper anymore. They're starting to behave like sharks. It's like, yipes. Well, what we're really seeing here is that the brain is not causative, and you don't use capacities of your brain, but it is a good symbol of consciousness. And let's just say, if you were like in 10% alignment with the Holy Spirit, you would be an average human being. Okay. And if you were 20% alignment with the Holy Spirit in your mind, you would be one step closer. 30%, you're probably a saint. With some pretty good psychic abilities, and I'm not saying you can walk on water if you're only 30% alignment with Holy Spirit, but just for the sake of this movie, that's what the metaphor is. The more you are in alignment with your source, the more you're in alignment with the Spirit, you have all these psychic abilities that are quite natural. And I'll just mention a couple. One psychic ability that is studied in parapsychology is called telepathy. Is everybody familiar with telepathy? That's as if you can read the thoughts. You can read other people's thoughts. I don't know, most people I talk to, they're having trouble reading their own thoughts. They're not interested into reading other people's thoughts. I got a mess going on here. I'm not interested in hearing what my neighbor is thinking. I've got enough problems with the thoughts that I believe in. Byron Katie says the thing about thoughts is, she says, don't believe them. That's what Byron Katie says about. So you have to see what I'm saying is telepathy is one of those states where you're getting more and more in alignment with the Holy Spirit. And now you're starting to realize that the other people don't have separate thoughts apart from your mind. Because why? There's only one of us. There's only one mind. You're never picking anyone else's thoughts up. You're just becoming more aware of the thoughts in your own consciousness because there's only one of us. There's only one consciousness. God did not create consciousness. Consciousness, Jesus tells us, is the domain of the ego. So we'll leave God out of that because it's all just pure illusion. But consciousness has a split mind, and it can be trained to be more alignment with the Holy Spirit as it becomes more consistently right-minded, if we're using Course in Miracles terms. The more right-minded you become, the more you go higher and higher in states of consciousness. These are all illusions too, because remember, there's only one of us, so there can't be different levels. Are you a higher one of us or a lower one of us? You see, that doesn't, one of us is one of us. We're all the same. We're all absolutely, literally the same in reality and also in terms of mind. There's only one mind. There aren't multiple minds, and there aren't multiple consciousnesses. Another symbol in this movie, did anybody ever see the movie What the Bleep Do We Know? Candace Pert and all these different philosophers, scientists, psychologists, biologists talking. Sometimes I remember Candace Pert was saying each cell in the human body has its own consciousness. By the way, the problem is if cells have consciousness, that's a lot of separate consciousnesses. The cell in my nose and the cell in my toe. No, parts are reflections of fragmented perception. Just like with a hologram, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. The whole is real, and the parts are just symbols. So we could say that it's not that cells don't have consciousness, but that everything that you perceive is consciousness. And there's only one consciousness. The key is whether that consciousness is fragmented, which is from ego belief, or unified, which is the Holy Spirit and Jesus. Unified consciousness is a happy dream because there are no levels to it. There are no degrees. There are no gradations. There are no opposites in unified consciousness. With the ego, everything has an opposite. So biological life, we think of biological life with like DNA and living, breathing, moving parts, animals and insects and so on and so forth. All of biology is part of a linear projection. Everything that's called biological life is, again, not really life because spirit is life and spirit doesn't have an opposite. There is no opposite to God. God is love. All of God's creation is love, and there is no opposite. So even in terms of birth and death, that gives you a clue that it's not real. Even in terms of male, female, of young and old, of beautiful and ugly, of tall and short, all of the world of opposites is a world of duality, including our beliefs around life and death. Some of you have seen the movie I have in my Movie Watcher's Guide to Enlightenment called Solaris. And at the end of Solaris, Rhea comes back and tells Chris, we don't have to think like that anymore. That's why we're watching Lucy today. I'm just saying, we don't have to think about past and future anymore. We don't have to think about male and female. We don't have to think about future goals and past regrets. We don't have to think about anything that involves duality because duality is part of fragmented perception. The entire dualistic illusion arises from false thoughts and false beliefs. And we don't have to believe that way anymore, and we don't have to think that way anymore, frankly. You know, if you want to be happy, why would you hang on to ego thoughts? You know, it doesn't make any sense. So in our movie today, Lucy is played by Scarlett Johansson, and she is a good starting point in our, we could say it's an evolution of consciousness. It's not really an evolution of people or situations. It's just an evolution of consciousness coming to wake up and realize that everything that was perceived was a mistaken perception. She's playing a young woman who's a student, and she has a boyfriend named Richard, and she has a roommate named Caroline. And so that's our starting point with Lucy. And then things are going to seem to happen to Lucy that involve a Korean gang, a group of gangsters who are going to try to turn our happy little student Lucy into a drug mule, into one who's going to be carrying their drugs so they can sell it and make money. So that can seem kind of extreme, and because it involves this Korean gangster mob, yeah, this movie has some guns in it and some blood. Sometimes people will write to me and they say, David, get this movie out of your collection because there's too many guns and too much blood. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Everybody has to have a starting point. Some of you watched the movie Revolver. Jake Green, he is a criminal. He's a criminal. He steals money. He's part of a gangster setup in Las Vegas, and then he goes through such a transformation of consciousness that he goes into a fearless state when he's going down an elevator, and releases fear from his mind. There's plenty of guns in Guy Ritchie's movie. So Revolver has a lot of guns. And then some of you know Way of the Peaceful Warrior. You know, that movie is the story of Dan Millman. And so Dan Millman is a gymnast for Cal Fullerton. And he goes through a transformation of consciousness through a series of pretty intense events that don't really involve so much guns, but they do involve getting his legs shattered and smashed up pretty bad. And he comes into a state of forgiveness, of realizing the present moment offers everything that he wants. So this movie, I think, is a very good teaching device, because when you start off with the character of Lucy, you're seeing a woman who's a young, attractive woman who is a student, and she has a boyfriend that she's been dating for about a week, Richard, which is a pretty common context. And yet, Luc Besson and his partner, Virginie, they use this as the starting point to introduce the idea that things in this world are not what they seem to be. Jesus tells us in the Course, you maybe believe that your feet are touching on solid ground, but things are not what they seem to be. And we are understanding, the more we go through our spiritual awakening, that we have been mistaken about what seems to be our life in the world. We are observing a character, and we are putting a lot of investment in this character, like we've got our own novella going. And we're putting a huge amount of investment in this character called the me, and it's not real. We've been tricked into believing that this character is real. And we may say, oh, we may talk about it with a joke sometimes, but underneath the joke, there's a lot of sadness. There's a lot of grief. It's like there's something underneath that knows this world is not our home and that we've been tricked into believing that it's our home. And we don't want to be tricked anymore. But we don't know the way out. How many of you have, like myself, have just put your hands up sometimes and said, I need help here. I don't even know what's going on anymore. I've been so twisted around. I need help. I need a lot of help. In my own case, you know, little baby David was born in Good Samaritan Hospital, a few miles from where I'm at now, where the body is, and then grew up in a family, went to church, was raised Christian, went to high school, went to University of Cincinnati, and was in University of Cincinnati for 10 years full-time. And then, by the grace of God, I took a trip, a vacation to a humanistic psychology conference out in La Jolla, California. And during the conference, I kept being drawn intuitively down to the area where all the psychologists were selling their books and cassette tapes and videos. And then these two people handed a book to me and said, you should look at this. This book is called A Course in Miracles. And I stood there at this psychology conference and opened up the book and, oh my gosh, Buzz Lightyear. Oh my God. What an experience. I was just like, oh, what is this? I mean, I could feel the vibrations just from picking the book up. I didn't know my whole life, I can't even call it life anymore. My whole trajectory was going to get thrown off into another angle. But I opened it up. So the spirit always reaches you with the symbols that you believe in. And Lucy is no different. You know, she's living abroad and she's going to be faced with a lot of intense symbols in her awakening journey. For David, in the parable of David, you know, David had been in university for 10 years, and A Course in Miracles comes with all these terms called educational terms, curriculum, learning goal. The whole book is filled with educational symbols. After I've just completed 10 years of university and bunches of years before that, the book comes to me in a way with educational symbols. I was raised a Christian. The Course uses the Christian symbols too. And when I was in undergrad and grad school, I studied, among other things, psychology, and there it is, a trifecta. Educational symbols, Christian symbols, psychological symbols. You see how that was tailored for my awareness. It was given to me in a language I could relate to. And then on top of all that, I was just a willing learner. I can't say I was very trained in meditation or any of the meditative arts, but I was just a willing learner, willing to say, okay, lead my life and guide my life. And that's the way that it came. It's also a book that uses relationships as mirrors to reflect what's going on in your unconscious mind. So that's how it played out for me. I got A Course in Miracles, and I went through relationship lessons that were all reflected back in my face. Some of you know what I'm talking about, in my face, because I was asking for healing. I was asking to have my consciousness cleared of all false beliefs and thoughts. So in the movie today, we're going to see Lucy going from being a single woman who's a student, and she's been dating this guy, Richard, for a week. And then suddenly, through a turn of events, her entire spiritual awakening will be accelerated immensely. And the beautiful thing about this is when it is accelerated to such an extreme speed, this has enormous help for us because we can see what she's going through and we can see what the lessons are. And she's showing us what we'll have to face as we start to open our hearts and minds up. She's going to have to face everything. She's going to suddenly have psychic abilities almost instantly through a drug experience. That it's going to be she's going to have her body inserted with these blue crystals, blue powdery substance, and this is the same substance that mothers have when they have a newborn child, an embryo growing in the womb, and this is the same powerful substance that's in small quantities when the child is developing bone structures. It's kind of like an atomic bomb of energy that is coming from a mother to an embryo. So as that baby starts to grow in the mother's womb and starts to develop bones, that's small quantities of what the substance that's going to be inserted into Lucy. With large quantities of this substance, she will begin to take on psychic abilities, and she will begin to realize that she can pick up radio waves, television waves. She can pick up what people are thinking, where people are. She has an intuitive feel, even if people are on the other side of the wall or in another part of the building, she knows where they are. It's more than astral projection. She's omniscient in some ways of everything that's going on in her surroundings. She can start to see the light waves and the energies in the people, in the plants, in the trees. She will begin to open up and even start to move into what we would call psychokinesis. Telekinesis is the ability to move objects with the power of your mind. I'm not talking about bending spoons. I'm talking about the power of your mind that moves the planets, that moves the stars that you see in the sky and the sun. I'm talking about not just moving a few objects, like in that movie Phenomenon with John Travolta, where he's able to spin a little pen on a table. I'm talking about psychokinesis, that you can move objects, you can move people with the power of your mind. This is more than just being able to levitate this or making someone levitate. This is starting to realize that your mind is so powerful that it's behind everything that seems to move in the whole cosmos. That you're not at the mercy of a moving picture. You're actually the one in consciousness that is inventing the entire motion picture. You're the director, you're the producer, you're all the actors, you're all the actresses. You're the one. In Matrix terms, you are the one. And that's a huge realization that Lucy will show us as you get closer to this. The more you start to realize that there's no external world and the world is not outside your mind, and that consciousness is just a state that is being cleared up by Jesus and the Holy Spirit, of course, you'll stop blaming the world. You will never again blame a politician. You will never again blame your mother-in-law or your spouse or your child or father or mother. You will never blame a Course in Miracles teacher. You will never ever watch a video and grumble anymore, because you will start to realize, oh my gosh, these are just symbols of my consciousness. I've been doing this to myself the whole time, and I could stop at any moment that I want. I could stop doing this to myself. I can come into the present moment instead of trying to leave the present moment and play the game of fragmented consciousness and fragmented perception. So to me, this movie is so fascinating that even if you watch it and you go on you go into a high experience, a soaring experience, even afterwards, you may want to just intuitively check it out. Luc Besson and his partner, they are basically, Virginia and Luc, they are amazing filmmakers. These are partners that have made a lot of movies, not a few movies, not several, but a lot of movies. So these are master filmmakers. The actors and actresses, we know Scarlett Johansson, she's one of our Movie Watcher Guide to Enlightenment stars. She stars in a number of them, but also we can see that there is a very interesting character in this movie called Pierre Del Rio. He plays a French police officer. He's actually another amazing actor from Egypt who has a very open mind, and all of the ones that are playing in this movie, all of the actors and actresses, are reflections of our own desire to wake up. They're going to show us through the movie the steps that you will seem to go through to realize that there's only one of us. That has to be the greatest realization of anything you could ever have, that there's only one of us. Because if there's only one of us, and that one is loving, then where is guilt? Where is victimization? How can you be mistreated if there's only one of us? How could you suffer if there's only one of us? How could you even experience pain if there's only one of us? You see, the distortion of the ego, the distortion of fragmented perception is the one thing we have to forgive. We have to release this egoic distortion of the way that we're looking at the world. So nothing in the world has to change. It's just that the way you look at the world has to change. It's time to go take our hate glasses and our anger glasses off, and it's time to put our love glasses on and see the world in a new way. That's all Jesus is saying, is he's just saying, see it with me. Just see it with me. Watch it with me. Have some fun. See the dance. Everything is a beautiful dance. Everything's in perfect order. This moment, everything is in perfect order, and this moment is the only moment that there is. Now, that's going to be fun when we really stay with that this moment is the only time that there is. Then we won't even get into comparisons. Then we won't even think, what am I going to do tomorrow? Who cares? Who really cares? Who is it that's doing anything anyway? Where I would rather undo the doer and be happy right now than get, oh, what am I going to do tomorrow? Oh, I'm going to have to clear my schedule. Jesus is like, yeah, maybe you could just let me clear your whole schedule for the rest of your worldly projections. You just let me take them all away. I'll take them all in one swoop. So before we start, Jesus gave us a music video so we can all get in the mood. This is a mood video. And this is a very devotional song called I Can Feel You by Jen Jensen. So sit back, enjoy the music, and away we go.